Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Birds TV, presented by DraftKings. I'm Jeff Mosher alongside Adam Kaplan, and our guest for this episode could not be more relevant in terms of helping us understand all about Eagles' second-round pick, Landon Dickerson, and the litany of injuries and surgeries that he's going to have to overcome to make it in the NFL. And especially as a rookie here with an altered offseason, as we'll see. So we're very pleased to be joined by former Washington and Denver Broncos guard turned renowned NFL analyst, Mark Schlereth, a three-time Super Bowl champion, a two-time Pro Bowler, 12 NFL seasons. Mark, we really appreciate you coming on. We're going to get to a lot of topics with you. First, we'll talk about Landon Dickerson, because as I read your bio there, the Super Bowls are great. The Pro Bowls are great. I think right now, Eagles fans see that you played 12 seasons in the NFL, and with all the surgeries that you've been very open about, that you've talked about in your career, and they're thinking, okay, so maybe there's some hope for Landon Dickerson. But what do you think about a team using a second-round pick on a guy who's had 4 procedures already before he even plays his first down in the NFL?
Well, I mean, obviously, you hope that at some point he figures out, or he stabilizes and he can be healthy. Always hard. Your body's such a compensation machine. Once you have had one injury, you tend to put more pressure on other parts of your body subconsciously to protect that area. And so that's where usually if you have a leg problem, that starts off on your right side, eventually you'll start having issues on your left side, because your body's just a great compensation machine. So that's always something that you concern yourself with, that you worry about when it comes to injuries. The one thing about ACLs and some of those injuries are so much less invasive than they used to be. Back when I had my first ACL, they said, we'll do more damage fixing it than you did injuring it. And so it's a much different procedure today than it was, back in the mid 80s when I had an ACL injury. And so those things, and they're not all created equal. If you have one ACL injury, as long as you don't do any damage to the cartilage, like you can tear your ACL without damaging your meniscus and without damaging the rest of your knee joint, then your knee joint stays pretty pristine. And the ACL reconstruction is a pretty, I don't want to say minor, but in the overall, kind of the overall realm of things, it's not as detrimental to your career as it would be if you tore multiple ligaments or especially the structural, the cartilage and those things. So every one of them is not the same, and we'll see. I will tell you this though, every time you go in there and you're altered, it's always interesting, because doctors will tell you, hey man, it was a successful surgery. Like, I did a hell of a job. Yeah. Right. And I'll never forget, I had a back surgery and I was in surgery for 4 hours, hanging upside down for 4 hours. And I come back to Denver, had it in LA. I come back to Denver, the renowned Dr. Watkins did my surgery, and I'm riding just in a pair of shorts on this stationary bike. It's probably, 8-10 days after I had the surgery. And this group of doctors comes in to check me out. And they're like, hey man, that's a really nice scar. And I was like, yeah, as long as it's on my fucking back, it's a great scar. On your back, it sucks, right? And so, it's always one of them situations where it's, every injury is different, and we'll see exactly how he operates. I will say this, and this is, this is the issue. I mean, I came into the league with a bunch of injury issues.
Did you? What did you have?
I had ACL and I had 6 knee surgeries and an elbow surgery coming into the league.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, but I was still gifted as an athlete. Like when Washington came out originally, Billy Devaney, who he was a scout at the time, then he took over as the GM of the Rams. Billy came and worked me out first, and Billy wanted to sign me as a tight end. Because I could run and jump, and even with the 6 knee injury or 6 knee surgeries, I could still do all that. I mean, I would blow away all the tests. And so he wanted to sign me as, that H-back motion fullback type of tight end. And then he had Joe Bugle come out and work me out, and they ended up drafting me as a guard or center, actually. And I transitioned to guard. but I was still very athletic, even with all those injuries that I had. And the more injured I got, the more you have to start to develop, your other parts of your game, the intelligence, how never to get beat, how to take great sets, how to use your help, how to understand where everybody else on the field is. And one of the things that really helped me was, I played defense my first 3 years in college. So I really understood.
You play D tackle?
I played nose guard, I played D end, I played D tackle, yeah. And so anyhow, that's where I had the majority of my knee surgeries or knee issues. So when I flipped back over to the offensive side of the ball, I came in as a center, redshirted, then I flipped to defense because of my athleticism. I played there for 3 years. I was actually retired as a junior because of all my injuries. Came back and played my senior year, but I moved to guard and didn't have an agent. I had 1 year of college football that I was healthy, and had no interest. And I actually showed up to other people's workouts. That's how I got drafted. I showed up to other people's pro days and begged scouts to work me out. So, that's kind of my journey to the NFL. Wow. And then once you get in, and you start to understand, like what they're trying to do, where they're lined up, kind of the angles of the game, which are so important, the techniques of the game, understanding, like I said, where your help is, how you can take an inside set if you have your fullback releasing on a burst through the B gap, you know how to funnel guys. I used to call it funneling guys where I want them to go, where I know they're going to run into traffic. And so, when you're an injured player, you have to rely on the intelligence that you've developed over the years to overcome those injuries so that you can stay for a long time. So if he has the ability to really understand the game, then he can put himself in a position to win, and he doesn't have to rely on athleticism to get himself out of bad positions.
So just one thing I was going to add. Dickerson's now had the left done. He had the right done. He's had 2 ankle surgeries. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have any ankle surgeries during your career? In addition to
No, I've had a couple of high ankle sprains, a couple of really bad, ankle twists and things of that nature, but I never had any surgery on those.
Yeah, gotcha.
All right, download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use that promo code ITB for a chance to win $55 when placing a bet of $1 on this weekend's big fight. 55-1 odds downloading the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the promo code ITB. Mark, just hearing you talk about that, I feel like, there should be a 30 for 30 done on you. I mean, I think you said you had 29 surgeries, so almost 30 right there. And then your just ability to persevere. Yeah. Hearing you talk about it makes me wonder, though, for Landon Dickerson, right? And I don't know if this was for you, but does having that many surgical procedures force you to compensate your body to compensate in other areas that you don't realize is going to happen at the time? Does it force wear and tear on other parts of your body that weren't quote unquote injured in the line of duty?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, your body is such a machine, a kinetic machine that ties, I always talk about, like just how your feet should work, how they should sound. Right. Mm-hmm. So when I'm coming off the ball, whether it's a 19 handoff, 18 handoff, whatever, like I always think about my first step, where I want my foot aligned with my ankle, aligned with my knee, aligned with my hip, right? And I want my feet to sound, when I come off the ball, I want, da-da! That's how I want them to sound, right? And on that second one, that's where I want to make contact. And to create leverage, you have to go, a lot of times coaches will give you the, hey man, you got to stay lower, and you're like, hey, no shit. Right. I mean, I get that. I'm getting impaled. Like, I understand that. Leverage is not about coming off the ball and being 8 inches lower than the other guy. That's impossible. We're going to both come off, if we're both 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", whatever, we're going to come off and hit helmet to helmet. Leverage is created through technique, through the proper footwork, through the proper, actually hip placement, the proper foot, like I said, foot, ankle, knee, hip, and then the sink and the snap. And those hips, as those hips turn and snap, your hand should be activated with those. And so a lot of players want to punch kind of out or come out. You really want to come up. So if the two guys are coming head to head, you want to take one this way and put his energy through the top of the ceiling, the roof of the stadium. And that's how you create leverage. And that's a technique thing. It has nothing to do with weight. It has nothing to do with even strength. It has to do with all technique. And that's why, you can be 100 or 285 and still get great movement off the ball. And you can be 340 and not be able to move anybody 2 inches. It really comes down to the technique that you have to understand and how to use and how to create that technique. And that's all, and how to create leverage through technique. And it is 100% technique.
Mark, as you got older, because Lane Johnson now he had a major ankle surgery, the right tackle. You've watched Lane before plenty. You're one of the best when it comes to offensive line play. Lane is now 30, coming off a major surgery. You've seen this guy play. How good, when you've watched his tape, how good is this player? And as you get older, we're not talking knees now because you had the knees, but we're talking ankle. He's had accumulation of injuries over the years. Do you get concerned when these guys get into their 30s?
Offensive line, listen, you never, here's the thing you have to understand. Lane is a phenomenal athlete. He's a great player. He's a lot of fun to watch, but you can get by without being, you can get by and you can thrive and you can be a Pro Bowl player as you lose athleticism, and you just make it up from the neck up. You start to thrive. You just have to adjust. You have to understand, especially after injuries. Like, one of the things, I had this guy when I was still playing. I used to take my son to spring training, and he was playing with the Rockies. His name was Darren Bragg, and I'll never forget. He was good outfielder, good player. And he's coming off an ACL. And I'm in the Rockies training room, or the Rockies locker room, at High Corbett Field in Tucson, Arizona. And so I'm talking to, a couple of the players and guys I know. And my son at the time is 11 or 12 years old, and I get carte blanche in there, and we're big baseball guys. And this Darren Bragg comes up to me and starts talking to me about just recovering from injuries and doing all these things. And I'm like, "How you feeling?" He goes, "Hey man, I'm just not quite there yet. I'm not quite 100%. And so I said, "Can I, kind of permission to speak honestly with you?" And he said, "Sure." And I go, I'm not quite 100% myself right out of the league, or yourself right out of the league. I go, "You have to understand, anytime you've had surgery, you've altered your body. You'll never be 100%. And what I tell everybody is, you have to figure out what your new 100% is. It may be 75% of what it was. It may be 80%, 90%, whatever it was, or whatever it is. But you have to reestablish in your mind, this is my new 100%, and I'll never be any better than this. And maybe, if I do get better than this, that's a bonus. But the bottom line is, I can go out here and be incredibly effective at 75% of what I used to be. As long as you can, adjust from a mental standpoint of the game." And the funny thing is about 8 years later, I'm doing a late night radio at ESPN, and Darren Bragg runs in. He's doing some playoff stuff. And he goes, "Dude," I bump into the hallway, and he's like, "Dude, you saved my career."
Wow.
That advice saved my career. And so for Lane Johnson, or anybody who's coming off an injury, you got to reestablish what your 100% is, and know that it's good enough, physically it's good enough to be productive. And then you have to adjust your game. There's things I can't do that I used to be able to do. So how can I become a more efficient player? How can I become a better player? How can I become a more intelligent player without having to rely on athleticism to bail me out? The one thing you have to understand about playing offensive line is and Lane Johnson's a phenomenal athlete, and all the guys who play offensive line are phenomenal athletes as far as, the average Joe walking around on the planet. But what you have to understand is, we're the worst athletes on any football field. And, I always joke around, but it's true. I've seen corners transition to safety. I've seen safeties transition to linebacker. I've seen linebackers transition to D ends. I've seen D ends transition to D tackles. I've seen D tackles transition to offensive line. The next step from offensive line is fan. You can't transition to go, hey, you know what? I'm going to lose 20 pounds and be a linebacker. It doesn't work that way. It's fan. It's O-line, fan. We are the last rung on the ladder. And so you have to understand that about the position that you play. And I'll put up the intelligence and technique. And I always say this, man, I can take a football to a Fox cafeteria and throw it to anybody in there and they can catch it and throw it back. I will open a can of whoop ass if we're doing one-on-ones in there. It's the most skilled position in football. And think about this, man. I can go against you 65 plays in a row and I can whip your ass. And you and I are the same weight, same height, same strength, right? That if I'm playing against you, but you're probably exponentially a better athlete than I am. And so I'm required to beat your ass 65 plays in a row. If I give up one sack, I'm terrible, and you go to the Pro Bowl, right? And so show me or tell me any other tip. This is why it's such a skilled position and why it's so important. And the intelligence level is it probably doesn't get the credit that it deserves. But you show me one other sport where like athletes don't play against one another.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like corners line up against wide receivers, safeties line up against tight ends, right? You got Dwight Freeney running a 4.5, turning a corner at 265, running a 4.5 40, and you got some land giant out there trying to match him athletically. It's not an athletic matchup. Right. It's apples to oranges. And so the skill and the intelligence and the understanding of where my help is, where my slide is, do I have a tailback? What angle should I take? How do I stop it? How do I change my sets? Do I up kick him? Do I short set him? Do I Harry Swain him? Which was a technique that Harry Swain developed, which is a 3-step kick and then attack. And there's only a few guys in the league that can even do it. So it's just this constant understanding of what's going on and what you're trying to accomplish. That's why I get really frustrated when I watch offensive lines give up 5 or 6 sacks and everybody says, oh, that offensive line sucks. And I'll tell you, the offensive coordinator sucks. It's your job as a coordinator when we're talking about pass pro, if we're going to throw it 30 times, can we take that 30 times we're going to throw it, and can we eliminate that to about 12 attempts that are where you have to hold up? And the great coordinators do it through, hey, 3-step drops, a couple of bubble screens over here. Hey, let's get 5 3-step drops. It gets 5, 4 or 5 bubble screens or screens off to the back. Let's get our swing passes off to the back. Let's make sure that we get a couple of all goes. So they're 5-step drops where the ball's out quickly, so you can up kick that, right? So now we're all of a sudden we've taken that 30 plays and we've eliminated it down to 15 times where you really have to hold up. Now, how many run action versus play action? How many run action plays can we get? Can we get 4 or 5 run action with boot keeps out the backside? So if we get 3 or 4 of those, now I'm down to 12. Now I'm down to 10. The great coordinators get you down to 8 to 10 to 12 plays where you actually have to hold up. And they do it in such a fashion where we are so good and we've been so on you and you are so confused about what's coming next that when it does come to a 7-step drop, hey man, we're good. Or a 5-step drop with a couple hitches, we're going to hold up on that one. Coordinators are by far, to me, the most important aspect of protection that nobody talks about.
Mark, you should do radio, sports radio, or something like that. Maybe even a show with Trey Wingo on Twitch, I'm thinking, with all the fountain of knowledge that you are and you have to give. Now, for those who don't know, Mark does do the morning drive on 104.3 in Denver as part of his many, many jobs, along with being an NFL analyst. So I want to now put a different hat on you. I want you to put your I work for an NFL team hat on, right? You are a scouting director. And I'm asking you this because I know you wrote in an ESPN column many years ago about the mental fortitude it took to play through all the surgeries and injuries that you went through. So you're a player personnel guy, scouting director,
right?
And you have the opportunity to sit down with Landon Dickerson coming out of Alabama, knowing what he's been through. What questions are you asking to find out about him?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I mean, you're always going to ask some football questions, kind of some understanding questions, just a basic knowledge, protections, slides, formationally speaking, re-identifying mics, things of that nature. I think the biggest thing that I want to know about guys is kind of what drives them. Like, why do you play? Really, what is it you play for? Why are you playing? Because there are two types of players in any sport. There's the intrinsically motivated guys and extrinsically motivated guys. And the guys that play for fame and fortune and girls and whatever, those guys don't last. It's the guys that grind, the guys that love the work, the guys that want to compete. And ultimately the guys that want to win. The thing I love about a guy that'll play hurt, a guy that keeps coming back, is it's important to him. And ultimately, the winning championships is difficult. You guys won one there a couple of years ago, and it's already fallen apart, right? It's difficult to have the right makeup. It is difficult to have guys that care more about the organization than they care about themselves. And a guy like Landon, that would be something that would intrigue me about him. Like, why do you keep coming back?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how much is enough for you?
Right.
And winning championships are hard because it requires you to celebrate other people's success like it's your own. And that unselfishness that is endemic to winning, that's hard to come by. That's a culture that has to be established, and it has to be lived and worked on every day. And the problem with most just sports teams in general is they think it's about talent. They think it's about running fast. They think it's about jumping high. They think it's about all the stuff that it's not about. And so it's really, when you get a team that really understands that, and players that live it on a day-to-day basis and demand it from their teammates, something special happens. But it's a hard thing to have that kind of unselfishness. And it's got to be intentional. I mean, it's like gratitude or thankfulness, man. If it's not intentional on a day-to-day basis, here's what I know about problems. As soon as you solve one, another will take its place. Like it's a biblical promise. We're going to struggle, right? That's just a biblical promise. But the bottom line is, teams that understand, that have gratitude, that are thankful, and that really support one another and really play for one another, those teams can be great. And players that are willing to do that for their teams, they'll play through things that you just don't think they can play through.
How do you explain, you're talking about the mental part of the game, a guy like Garrett Bowles of the Broncos looked like he's going to be a bust, and all of a sudden he turns his career around. He gets this big extension. What happened with him? How was he able to do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm really interested to see exactly how he plays this year.
Okay.
Because, as you know, there was a moratorium on holding calls. The league put a stop to it. I called the game against Chicago where we were in the third quarter, and Garrett Bowles, I said it on the broadcast, currently Garrett Bowles has more holding calls than the Broncos have points. It was 4-3. And so one of the issues is that when he's getting called, he gets frustrated, and then he loses technique and he gets sloppy. So I'm really interested to see. Now, I don't know why the league would go back to calling more holding calls. Like, hey, it's all about offense. Let's let it roll, right? But I will say he did a much better job. It took him some time. He was so raw coming out. Adam, he's one of the best athletes that I have ever watched play. He's like Lane Johnson, only on the left side. He's a phenomenal athlete. Technically speaking, he just constantly took the exact same set on every single play. So you watch him, and he constantly was set, turn. And so one of the things you want to do as an offensive tackle is you want to keep your shoulders kind of perpendicular to the line of scrimmage. You're always going to turn a little bit, but you want them pretty perpendicular to the line of scrimmage. When you open up, it invites a soft corner, a soft inside, and you're basically saying, hey, run me over. And so the way he would set, he would constantly get set, open. And it created just multiple ways for guys to get to him. He was so raw that he didn't understand sets very well. He never altered his set. He never changed his setup. And so for defensive players, that's like an invitation just to work a guy over. And this year, I just think the game slowed down a little bit. He understood it better. And he adjusted some of his sets. He was much better pass pro set wise. And he's always been pretty good run block, coming off the ball and doing those things. But there were so many mental mistakes over the first 3 years. And as soon as he'd make one, he'd make 4 more on a drive. And it was one of those things that would just snowball. And he's just much better mentally at overcoming some of the mistakes and not putting himself in that position. So that really is, I mean, athletically, I watched him coming out. I covered the draft when he came out, and he was by far, no question, one of the top, pound for pound, one of the best athletes in the draft that year. But just very raw, very aggressive, but very raw. And I tell you what, I personally didn't think there was any way. I didn't think there was any way that guy could overcome the issues that he had. But I stand corrected. It was miraculous the way he overcame the issues that he's had over the first 3 years of his career.
All right, I have another Broncos question for you. Really quick, I want to remind our listeners to stop paying full retail price for things they want. Get on Deal Dash. Go to DealDash.com or download the app. Register, use the promo code ITB for a special offer for some bonus free bids. So the Broncos kind of impacted the Eagles draft in a way there, Mark, because I think a lot of people felt that they would take Justin Fields, and the Eagles and their fans and even their management had eyes on Patrick Surtain, but that didn't happen. They wound up taking Patrick Surtain. And I'll ask you, they don't take a quarterback. Did the Broncos think that they're closer to being a really good team than maybe other people outside would think?
No, I think they've come to the realization with George Payton here that they are still a few years away from being competitive roster wise. I'm not talking about quarterbacks. I'm talking about just building a roster that can compete. One of the things that I will always tell people just about rosters in general, and I give Pro Football Focus for me right now is kind of like Chip Kelly back in the day for the Eagles. They just irritate me. And I know they work hard and they're trying to do a good job, but you're grading players, you're grading offenses, you're grading on you have no context. You don't have the play sheet. You don't know what the call is, right? And so they gave the Broncos the 6th best roster in the National Football League. So a 5-11 team has the 6th best roster in the National Football League. They gave them a better roster than the Saints. The last time I checked, the Saints, both offensive tackles are all pro. Their guard is a Pro Bowler. Their center's a Pro Bowler. Their running back's a Pro Bowler. They're are all pro. Their quarterback, well, not this year, but so let's go. Kamara's an all pro. Thomas outside is all pro. Defensively, like their middle linebackers an all pro. They're out the defensive ends all pro. Cameron Jordan there. Trey Hendrickson, who went to Cincinnati, went to the Pro Bowl last year. Malcolm Jenkins was a Pro Bowler. Their corner, Marshawn Lattimore's an all pro. I mean, I'm like, and they're 11, and the Broncos went 5-11, and they've got one all pro or whatever, and they've got a better roster. I always think one of the places you can see whether a team's roster is any good or not is how they play special teams. Show me the team that's ranked high in special teams, and I'll show you a team who's got depth, quality of depth as a roster. So a lot of times I think people who rate things get duped into believing they'll look at a couple drafts and say, well, look, last year they got 4 starters, and the year before that they got 3 starters. And my thought process is this: if 3 of the 4 starters should be backups, and they're starting, like, even on shitty teams, you still have to field 22 starters. You don't say, hey, listen, we got 4 guys who aren't worth a crap. So we're just going to start 7 on defense. Can you guys match us? Like, can we play 7 on 7? It's not how it works, right? You still got to start 22 guys. And so when you start guys that should be backups, you know what that means about your backups? It means your backups probably shouldn't be in the league.
Mm.
And so you all of a sudden, I mean, the Broncos right now start 2 middle linebackers who can't run. And I'm like, in today's, I mean, if you watch the Super Bowl, in today's football, that underneath coverage and those linebackers that can run, that can cheat their zone. So if you got 2 middle linebackers that are hook droppers, right? And you're hook dropping and you're trying to be, 10 to 12 yards deep, about 1.5 yards, 2 yards outside the hashes, and you say, hey man, let's see if I can extend that to 14 yards deep and 3 yards outside the hash. So all those in-cutting routes, the deep dig route, I take it away by body position, and then all of a sudden you throw some drive and I explode. I mean, I just trigger, explode, and I tackle it for 3 yards and it's 2nd down and 7. And you're like, son of a gun, right? Those guys, like in Tampa, what they did with White and with Levante David, it was remarkable what they were able to do, just from a speed, athleticism, fluidity of movement, cheating zones. You look at Fred Warner's ability to do that. You look at Seattle and their linebackers and what they've done, matching up, base to nickel, because they can get that. They understand that. They understand how to cheat zones. They understand how to read route combinations. So, when you have that ability, to me, there's probably 2 spots in all of football. We focus on corners, and it's important. Corners and safeties are important. Don't get me wrong. But in today's game, the guys to me that are targeted the most are those middle linebackers and the nickel guy. Who's our nickel guy? And that's where you're basically trying to, anytime you're trying to expose a defense, what you're doing is trying to put some player, and a lot of times it's the middle linebackers or it's that nickel guy, put him in conflict. Throw some smash in front of him, let him see it, and see if we can throw it behind him. Or if he gets too much depth, run something behind him and get that smash in front of him that's going to catch it for 4 yards, and he's going to fall forward for 8, and it's 2nd down and 2. And that's what we're trying to do. And teams that have linebackers that can run and a nickel dude who can seriously cover, both in zone and man, those guys have a huge advantage. And that's really, to me, one of the big changes of the league from even when I played in it to what it's doing right now, even the last 5 or 6 years.
I do have to ask you, for calling games on Fox as you have, what was the state of overall play from watching the tape last season of getting ready for each week, for not having practices in the offseason, and also training camps being limited? What did you think of the state of play of the NFL last season from tape?
Like I thought it was good, Adam. It was good. I thought, obviously, I think it would be better if you practiced. I think what you saw is when teams got injured, how quickly it went bad, because you couldn't prepare young guys to play because they didn't get the reps. So veterans who have played a lot of football and they roll in, it took a couple of weeks to get everything, to where it was acceptable or solid. So early in the season, it was pretty limited. You were pretty condensed in what you were trying to do. And as the season rolled on, you expanded those things. But I thought I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was bad. But what you saw is you're 1 or 2 injuries away from offensively. You get a couple offensive linemen injured, you're in deep crap, because the guys that they're bringing in, they can't play. They don't have the reps. They don't have the experience. They don't have the preseason. They're just flat not ready to play. And so you see that across the board with a lot of players, even DBs and everybody else. And then just the communication, I think, the communication aspect of what you're trying to do. Like I said, it was simplified somewhat early, and it expanded as the season went on.
Wow, good stuff. And obviously the Eagles are a team that is constantly addressing their offensive line, trying to get younger and trying to get better up front, Mark, so that they can be one of those dominant teams again. Thanks so much for coming on, Mark. We really appreciate all the insight that you gave us. I want to ask you real quick about what you're doing going forward. First, I want to remind everybody that our friends at Sky Motor Cars are on a used car buying frenzy. So if you're looking to get rid of your car, now is the time to do it, as Sky Motor Cars is offering top dollar in cash. So check them out at skymotorcars.com. When's the next episode coming out on Twitch of Schlereth and Wingo? When do we get that?
Well, I think we're going to try to do Friday, so tomorrow at some point. But that would require. It's always funny when they set you up with all this stuff, and we're setting it up and we're putting the show together, and they're telling me how to operate the show, and the guy is speaking to me like at some point I just have to say, hey, dude, I'm not 14. Like, I don't understand any of this. Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm not a 14-year-old. So you gotta make this simple for me. But yeah, I think we'll start a little bit more regularly. We start tomorrow, and looking forward to that. I'm excited about that. It's just going to be. It's fun.
How's your line of condiments to let the listeners know where they could get your stuff?
Yeah, stinkygood.com. You can get. We've got a line of green chili. We've got a queso dip. We're going to start a gourmet steak line as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So anyhow, really trying to. We still do. We're in Costco's in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, San Diego. We're in the grocery stores here in Colorado, but we're really trying to move our business a little bit more direct to consumer.
Okay.
Which is a little tricky because we're a made fresh, flash frozen product. So we ship frozen. Mm-hmm. So, the shipping prices are a little bit ridiculous. We're trying to work those to get a little bit better value to the customer. We don't take any profit on that. We just, we try to do it, as best we can. But, our online business has grown quite a bit here in the last year and a half since COVID. So we're really trying to focus more on that, but it's been a 13-year labor of love. Like I said, I say it all the time. Had I known then what I know now, I'd pick something else to invest in. But one of these days we're gonna make some. One of these days we're gonna sell it to Hormel or something to be done. So Hormel, if you're listening, please come and check us out.
This is just a guess here, but I think you're going to do all right in life, Mark. I think you'll be fine, right?
Well, I'll tell you this. My father gave me a piece of advice when I was a little kid. It always resonated, stuck with me. He goes, find something you love to do, and you'll never have to go to work. And shoot, man, my childhood dream from the time I was 12 was to play in the National Football League, and I did that, and now I've talked about it for the last 22 years. So I tell you what, it's been a gas. I love it. Love working at Fox. Love doing the games. The games are there. It's a whole lot like playing, only you don't get the crap beat out of you. So at the end of the game, I throw a bunch of stuff in a garbage, the circular file, and I walk out, and I'm like, hey man, good, bad, or indifferent, that was one of the games I did, so we'll move on. So anyhow, pretty good stuff. I'm excited to see exactly what Philly ends up doing, because I thought last year was I just thought it was an overall debacle. I did a game against Cleveland, and it was
my God, you may have done the worst game ever for them.
Yeah. It was bad, but it's so much was put on Carson, and then you're watching, like I'm watching film, and you're watching, your young rookie receiver is supposed to set a pick and doesn't do it on a 3rd down and 1, avoids the contact so the DB can flip over the top and stop the gain, and like just stuff that was so consistent. You could see that people weren't afraid of any receiver. Alshon Jeffrey retired, didn't tell anybody. Like you could see that nobody was threatened deep, and like they didn't look at any receiver that you had on your roster saying there's not one person that can run by us. Wow. So saw so much press, so much disruption of routes. The protection was just pathetic, and Carson took a beating, and then at some point he just looked like he didn't want to get hit anymore, which I don't blame him. I understand how that feels. So it was a debacle. And then I love my guy Doug, but you know how Doug is. Like Doug is This is what I'll never understand about coordinators or head coaches that are coordinators on the offensive side of the ball. Like, why do you see a 2-yard run as an excuse not to run anymore, but you'll throw 4 incompletions in a row and still throw it? Like, I will never understand that aspect of being a coordinator. We all know that Doug would much rather throw it than run it. So, and I give him grief for it all the time, but it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. And if there's going to be enough competition through rock, scissors, and papers to really improve as a football team. So.
A parting shot from Mark Schlereth. That is awesome. You're going to have to come back with us down the road, especially at some time in the season, because this is too good to only do once, Mark. All right.
Anytime. I'm easy to get a hold of.
Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. For Mark Schlereth and Adam Kaplan, I'm Jeff Mosher. Thanks everybody for watching Inside the Birds TV. We'll catch you on the next one.